Yo, what's up, guys? It's your boy, the Insane Game Free. Hope you guys are doing all right. I'm still in what I call recovery mode, but I am getting better and back to a more stable and consistent version of myself. So if nothing else, we're working on it. I wanted to come up here and put out another video for you guys because I can't kill another mega episode and then not put out content. It's just that I literally have been recovering from COVID and just dealing with that, and I still am recovering from COVID. I'm not contagious anymore, but lingering residuals are still in the system, so if I sound a little off or weird, that's why. So today's video is actually something that I wanted to make like a week ago, but it wasn't physically in the position to make the said video. And it's regarding Sony in Japan and kind of the future of Sony and PlayStation in general, specifically in Japan, although it does affect the Western side of the fan base. So there's been a lot of talks recently about Sony having no interest in really supporting Japan anymore as an avenue for their brand. And the reason why these things have come up is for a couple of different things. If anyone remembers, a few years ago there was a bunch of controversy with Sony because they had these issues with crossplay and they had these issues with censorship, and then they moved their main office from Japan to California, and all of a sudden a bunch of fucking games started getting censored or started getting these weird regulations and restrictions on them, and people were in the back like, okay, this is a little concerning. What's the big deal? And there were talks about how Sony internally had changed up some management and mentioned how they want to start cracking down on, questionable material in games, which really translates to a bunch of Japanese related gaming shit. We even had game creators like Simmering Kagura's developer be like, alright guys, I'm out, peace, fuck this shit. And the motherfucker left because you had such a weird changes. Just to give an example, Shinra Kagura had 2 games on PS4, right? You had the Peach Beach Splash game, which is just a water gun shooting game full of a bunch of swimsuits and titty and obviously shooting girls with water guns. And then you had them, and then he went and did the remake of the first game, which originally came out on the 3DS. And for some reason, the anime water gun titty shooting game is uncensored, but the fucking remake of the first game, which by the way, the first couple of games in Simmering Kagura were taken way more seriously than the later games were, and there was actually less fan service in those games. They had to take out features for it to get kind of proper approval to be on the PlayStation console, next to the titty game that came out a couple years before, and the Estival Versus game that came out a few years before that. And it was like, what in the flying fuck is going on? Well, the reason why it's come up again is because there's been articles coming out about how Sony has even less investment in Japan now than it did a couple years ago. There's been talks that they've essentially cut down a lot of the Japanese divisions in Sony's in Sony of Japan's branch, and that and they have less Japanese developers in general. On top of that, there's talks about how they've essentially become more focused on the Western side, even citing things back to the launch of the PlayStation 4. For those who don't know, the PlayStation 4 wasn't a worldwide release. The PlayStation 4 released in America and Europe before it released in Japan. It released in Japan later after it was already out in America and Europe. The other issue is that they've gotten rid of a long-standing tradition and changed the confirm button, which was in Japan was always the circle button, is now the X button like the Americans and the Europeans have always had it. Now that in itself isn't a big deal, but it looks more and more suspicious when you're hearing all these other reports, and some of these reports are internal. of like developers being like, yeah, we're just kind of sitting here. The Japanese division for some of our games are cut. And then you look at the game releases that are coming out. When's the last like Japanese game we got? Now, obviously, people are gonna point Ghost of Tsushima, but Ghost of Tsushima isn't Japanese. The developers of that game is Sucker Punch, if I remember correctly, which is an American. Well, it's a non-Japanese studio. Is the point I'm making. And a lot of people believe that part of this is coming from the fact that even though the PlayStation 4 was killing it in US and Europe, it didn't sell that well in Japan. It actually sold about as well or around the same level as the PS3, which, if you guys know, was notorious for not selling in its early days because A, you couldn't afford the bitch, B, you couldn't find the bitch, or 3, you didn't want the bitch. I mean, that's the reason why I used to make videos back in the day mentioning how the Wii U was in some cases outselling the PlayStation 4. Because it's true. It wasn't like I was lying. And it's all created this whirlwind that just comes to this one conclusion. Sony has less interest in Japan as a market because they're not making any money. Their games don't sell as much over there. And the money, I think they're just following the money at this point. Western gamers are buying their shit more than Japanese gamers. And part of it is them not trying. That's part of it. Part of it is just them not trying. And now it's even going to get worse because they're not only are they not trying, they're even less involved than they already were. Remember, your main branch isn't even in the country anymore, and the people in Japan are now waiting for the approval to do things from the goddamn branch that's in Los Angeles, which is the main branch now. On top of that, the censorship's still going on top of everything else. And some developers are like, bah, I think I'm going to have to peace out on this bitch. Simran Kagras, like I said, already left. And the question is this a good thing or not? That's really that's the core of today's discussion. And the answer is fuck no. Capcom did the same thing back, I want to say, in the late 2000, it was like around 2010. You had that real dark era of Capcom where they focus on primarily Western gaming. And Square, even big budget Square does it. The advantage Square has is that Square hasn't completely said fuck it's AA development, which is why we get things like World Ends With You and Bravely Second, right? They haven't completely ditched it. But like Capcom went through an era where they completely said fuck Japanese development in every sense of the word. And they primarily focused on Western. And then they changed their mind and kind of reset themselves, which is ironic because there's been a lot of talk with Capcom recently about putting out these weird guidelines about how it's almost like they're cracking back down on it again. I don't know what the fuck's going on, but that shit never ends well. And I think Sony's going to truly regret it because not only are they allowing Nintendo to essentially monopolize Japan, Xbox is going to start really coming for their spot. There's already been rumors, and we've already been seeing Xbox over the Xbox One generation has definitely been making strides to court Japanese developers. The reason why the shit never worked and the reason why it was such a struggle for them is, one, their fan base is so pigeonholed into like these 2 to 3 type of games, it's fucking astounding. And then on top of everything else, Nintendo has always had a stronger hold. And the fact that Japanese gamers just have different sensibilities about what they give a fuck about. And Xbox was never it, because Xbox made such a bad first impression back in the day. When you put out a new console, that controller was really much built for Americans, and you threw it to the Japanese and said, just use this. And Japanese developers were like, you're out of your fucking mind. We got 2 other consoles we can work with. Why the hell do we need to use you? And guess what? That's kind of been the case because Xbox never sold in Japan. No matter which version of the console it was, Xbox has never sold in Japan. But they have definitely been making strides to court those developers. And Nintendo's just sitting pretty with free fucking money that they're going to get more of because they don't have competition. The other thing people don't realize, and I think some Sony gamers definitely will agree with me, is that Sony gamers, like Nintendo gamers, like Japanese games. When you fucking forgo that kind of game development and that thought process, your console now is less appealing to me as a whole. The shit I like about you is that you also involve yourself in the type of gaming I care about. They'll still get big budget releases, but like the niche shit was part of the main differentiating factor between you and Xbox. People don't understand that. Sony and Xbox primarily had the same kind of fucking libraries. The only difference is two things. Sony had their own exclusives, and had more of their own exclusives, and they had Japanese games. Those were your two things that made you different from your competition. And what the fuck did you do? You said all our first-party games are going to be the same game. Like, people get mad when I say that shit about Sony titles, but like, Sony's mainline franchises are all the same kind of game. Third-person action-adventure game. Some's more action-focused, some more exploration-focused. But they're in the core of it, they're all the same kind of game. Uncharted, God of War, Horizon, Ghost of Tsushima, the fucking Last of Us, they're all the same kind of game. I can take a screenshot in the middle of like basic gameplay and they will all look the same. It'll be me standing over here towards the left of the screen, a little bit more space so you can see the environment and shit, and me running. That's it. Like that's so Sony's MO now. And cutting off your Japanese development takes away your variety. The only little variety, Ratchet & Clank is now like a shining light in the fucking in the dark house of Sony, because at least it looks different. And even then, it's still devolved, and it's still a third-person action game. It's just that Ratchet & Clank has the advantage of looking like a different kind of game because of its animation style and being non-realistic and it being more cartoony. But it all still devolves into the third-person cinematic movie-like experience. And you've taken out all your niche Japanese shit. Like how Gravity Rush, that's just a dead IP now. Because that developer has moved the fuck on. I had forgot about it because I didn't play Gravity Rush when it first came out. Gravity Rush came out and then they killed the service for it. I think it was within the first year of the game being out. And it was like, why? Are we going to get another game from the Tearaway developers? I don't fucking know. And that's the kind of shit that bothers me. Because those games, they weren't huge games. But those are the games that differentiated you guys as a fucking studio and a developer. And it drew people to you. Those games weren't selling 6 to 12 million copies. But they were selling well enough to justify keep making them. And it builds up a fucking background for your shit. Why you think Nintendo, ironically enough, has IPs that are very much like Sony in the sense that, like, they're not technically owned by Nintendo, but you associate them with Nintendo. Bayonetta has become one of those characters. And so the hell is Travis Touchdown for No More Heroes. That is a franchise that isn't Nintendo only, but is viewed as Nintendo only because of the association. And that's a quirky ass game. Same thing with Okami. Okami's viewed more as a Nintendo franchise than anyone else because, hey, there were DS games, and the best version of Okami came out on the fucking Wii. What truly frustrates me about the whole situation is that they're going to pay for this in the long run, and we're going to pay for it now by not getting any variety in our games. Here's my thing. Okay, fine, I get it. I get that America makes more money. It's your job as Sony to make me interested in your games. So focusing on the same kind of game and that being your only fucking output is super unappealing. And it also makes you look worse as a developer. It's like, oh, well, the best we could do is just to kind of give up on Japan and then just focus on the games that were making money because they were about diversity and they were about wokeness, about blue pill nonsense. And I'm like, bruh, I give a fuck about women of color in my games, alright? It's not that aesthetically I wouldn't mind women of color, but my problem is that the premise of your game usually revolves around it being a woman of some sort and a woman of color of that. And I know that's your agenda, which makes it less appealing of a game to me. And the fact that that's it. Your defining thing about, let's be real here. You know what Horizon Zero Dawn comes off as when you first look at it? It's just futuristic Tomb Raider. It's Sony's version of Tomb Raider. That's what it feels like. Now I know that's not what it is, and it's supposed to be more than that. Or how God, we gotta make men more varied. We can't just have another angry white man running around killing gods. We gotta make him more than that. We need to make the game about a father-son bonding exercise. And I'm just like, these aren't bad ideas, but there was also nothing wrong with Gravity Rush. There was also nothing wrong with Tearaway. Are we gonna get another Bloodborne, which was also a Japanese game? People forget that. From Software. That's Japanese. That's not American. Like, can we get that? And some people say, well, we're getting Demon Souls. Cool, but you know, how about new shit? I mean, like, I'm past. That's why I say, like, even though I like Nintendo games, but that doesn't mean you're still not gonna catch me out here playing a Pirate Warriors game, or a Spike Chunsoft game, which don't get a lot of love, or a Suda 51 game. Like, there are other fucking developers, and burning them, and that's what makes it worse. It also is that you're specifically burning the Japanese developer with these fucking censorship laws. Because Americans don't have those kind of sensibilities. Fuck them! Fuck Americans! Like, what are you talking about? Half of the Americans who play PlayStation buy those games. Those games make money in the States. So you're not just burning the Japanese gamer, you're also burning the American and European gamer who love this kind of shit. And for what reason? What fucking reason do you have? Well, the PlayStation 4 didn't sell as well, and the PlayStation 5 isn't selling well either. The PlayStation 5 isn't selling well because there's only 5 fucking copies of it, even out in the goddamn wild. And the PlayStation 4, that's on you. You weren't putting out games. I remember that quote that came out where you guys were like, I don't even know why the PlayStation 4 is selling. You know why you said that? Because there wasn't enough out there to justify buying one, but people still bought it, and you couldn't come up with a good enough reason for people to fucking buy it. Miles Morales and Spider-Man, that's a different kind of game, but you want to know what makes that game different? Because it's superhero focused. So the superhero focus kind of overtakes it being another like cinematic experience. But now we get less variety in our games, less variety in our developers, and a more homogenized Sony. But they want to sit there and lie to people and tell them, oh, well, we still care about the Japanese gamer. Bitch, where? All the games you've announced are all American. Can we get a Japanese game in this motherfucker? Like, man, that's why I got bummed out when I saw the Final Fantasy 16 trailer. Because it just looks like another fucking, like, American Final Fantasy. It's like, oh, god damn it. I thought we were past this shit when we finished with 15's bitch ass. Nah, we gotta do more American Final Fantasy. I mean, thank God for things like Bravely Default. And then you got Resident Evil over here in the corner. Now, Resident Evil's kind of going back to being a little bit more Resident Evil instead of being like fucking Outlast and PT and shit. But like, I'm so done with the American design of games. Because the reason why we fell in love with these developers and their games was for the Japanese aspect of them. So, of course, I don't care about this bitch turning into an action hero. Because that's not why I got into the IP in the first place. It just bums me the fuck out. And it frustrates me. Because it's going to burn Sony in the long run. And by the time they realize it, we will have gone through a whole generation. By the time Sony realizes maybe we shouldn't have let the Japanese gamer lapse like that and fucked over a bunch of developers, it will be like 3 or 4 years gone by. And then on top of that, it makes you not want to buy games on Sony platforms because they have no investment in those kind of games. To the point where they'll censor them almost out of spite. But the people who would buy those games, a small amount of censorship isn't going to change. And what I mean by that specifically is the woke, like the general masses that you want to buy those games, aren't going to now buy those games because you cut out a little bit of titty flesh in a goddamn JPEG or PNG file. So why even change it? Why even touch it? And then you're like, I want to make money with them. Well, why don't you make more fucking consoles, huh? Why don't you make more fucking consoles and make more variety in your goddamn games instead of just being like, no, we just ain't doing it no more. It's the worst way of handling shit. Hey, I'm not a game developer. But please leave your thoughts and comments in the comment section below and tell me if you feel like Sony's whole Western mindset is the way to go when it comes to handling the future of the Sony brand. Because I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to make it easier and easier for Xbox to get ahead of you for no other reason than, I just don't think it's worth the time and investment in Japan anymore. But we still care, but we're just going to get rid of everything that would prove that. So, you know, actions speak louder than words, but fuck it, ain't whatever. Because I'm Sony, I'm on the top of the goddamn world. For now. Peace out.